Hi, this is Meg Riley here in sunny Minneapolis, Minnesota, where the board of the Church of the Larger Fellowship is gathering today as we begin a board meeting. So it seemed like a perfect day to talk about the Church of the Larger Fellowship. So I'm going to be kind of quiet uncharacteristically because it would be weird if I were interviewing people from my own organization, but I am really excited to be here with a bunch of folks that I work with regularly and to be with the other hosts of the VUU, one of whom is just back from someplace really exciting that we want to hear all about. So, Tom Shade, why don't you jump in and say hello?
Hi, everybody. This is Tom Shade. I'm in Ann Arbor, Michigan. It's a beautiful day today. It's been in the 60s. So, and I'm glad to be here. The trees are turning.
Hi, I'm Joanna Fontaine Crawford, and I am in Austin, Texas, where it is raining, and we are preparing for flooding after having drought and wildfires, and you know, we're grateful for the water, but a little concerned about what it's going to mean to people. And as Meg mentioned, I just got back from the Parliament of World Religions, which was held in Salt Lake City this year. I have to admit, wow, you know, that whole thing about it's better to be lucky than to be smart. Before I went there, I didn't realize what a big deal this was. Reverend Sean Dennison had told me about it last year and said, hey, you should come. So I was there. It actually is, I won't use his exact words, Joe Biden's, but it is a big deal. They do this every 6 years. The last time it was, and they do it around the world, picking different countries every time. The last time it was in the United States was sometime in the 90s. It was supposed to be in Belgium, I believe 1 or 2 years ago, and for economic reasons they had to cancel, and so it wound up in Salt Lake City. And it was just, I'm just now getting to the point where I can start to actually articulate some of what was great about it. For, you know, I had several days of buzz where it was just, I was just kind of incoherent and babbling, you know, amazing.
Well, Joanne, how many people were there, and like how many of them were from the U.S. and what religions, and just kind of give us some context for
okay. So I believe what I read was that it was like 9,000 people. I'm not sure about that, but I do know that it was there were over 50 countries that were represented there. I believe just about that many religions. And it was amazing, you know, an amazing experience when you're just walking through the halls and, you know, here are these people in kippas and here are these Buddhist monks in orange robes. And I have to say, you may have seen some of the news articles about the Langar that the Sikhs did. I had never participated in one of those, and I think for many of us that was like the experience that affected us the most.
Say what Langar is.
So Langar, deep in Sikhism, is you know, beliefs about hospitality and generosity, and also about equality, because they come from countries where you have a caste system. And so a Langar is where they feed you. It's a homeless man, a king. And so the thousands of people that were there in Salt Lake City, they fed us all lunch every day. And, you know, you would watch, and of course they had it because they do this, and so they had it very well organized. They knew how to get you in and out, and you would sit down and people would come by with these big silver pails of really delicious food, and you know, they would say, eat until you are full. Do not leave until you are full, in fact. And one of the really touching things in all of this is that they would thank you for participating and for letting them do this. And a member of my church, Donna Durbin, was at this as well, and both she and I were talking about, boy, is there any way to bring back this experience, this spirit of generosity to our own church? But also really, really amazing speakers. I mean, just one right after the other.
Speak event for just one moment. It looked like everybody was wearing head covering for that when I saw it.
Right. So there were several things. So first of all, they had these racks set up where you would leave your shoes. You wouldn't walk in. You wouldn't wear shoes into it. And then they also believe in covering their heads during the meals. So if you didn't have a turban or a shawl or something, they had a little something for you to put on. And then you would, unless you physically couldn't, you would sit on the floor. Everyone sat on the floor together. So it was a pretty amazing experience. I loved being part of that. And I have to say, another thing with the Sikhs, another thing that they did, as Unitarian Universalists, we try to be very sensitive about cultural appropriation. And but there is also the question of, okay, but what if a culture invites you into that? And the Sikhs had set up this area during the entire parliament where you could go. I did not take part in this, but many people did. You could go and they would explain the history of the turban, and then they would put a turban on you and give you a turban, and they would explain, the religious meaning underneath that. And so part of this already kind of surreal experience was watching people who were not Sikhs, walking around with these great big turbans on their head. And as a UU, that's there's something ingrained in us of, no, you don't do that. And I had to kind of say, oh, but this is that they get to, if they are offering this, that's a different thing. So speakers, like I said, I know I'm just babbling here, but it was one of those kind of experiences. The speakers were just one great speaker after another. Jim Wallace was there, Karen Armstrong, Jane Goodall, who is 80-something years old, and she travels 300 days a year speaking out about environmentalism. The environment was very much one of the topics of the Parliament, as well as religious freedom and poverty. And one of the most powerful things was Sunday night, when you had several speakers at the plenary talking about the violence in the world. People like Alan Bosak, John Esposito, Tariq Ramadan. One of the surprises with the speakers for me was Marianne Williamson. Tom, I'm sure you know Marianne Williamson, right? Oop, you're muted.
Sorry. Not personally.
But you know of her.
Yeah, I know of her by reputation.
I have to admit, I thought that she was, I love that famous, reading of hers, the one that occasionally attributed to Mandela about, basically don't hide your light. But I had this stereotype of her as kind of this airy-fairy, flute in the background, new ager. No, she is fierce. She is ready to throw down, very much a feminist, very blunt, just kind of say it like it is. It was very exciting. Now I'm like, okay, now I want to go back and read her stuff, but with her actual voice in my head. Yeah.
Well, Mega's gone, just to interrupt for a minute, Mega's gone off camera because she's having technical difficulties getting a good picture through. And we're also joined by Hank Pierce, one of our regulars. Hank, why don't you check in real quick?
Hi, folks. I'm so glad to be here. So good to see. Oh my gosh, it's just a huge bunch. Of folks.
Yeah,
here.
we're dropping in on a CLF staff meeting, but that's all right.
As I know, my wife is in Minneapolis right now, and I'll be joining all of them later on tonight or tomorrow. My wife Rebecca Scott's on the CLF board, for those of you who don't know. I'm doing fine. Sorry I'm late. I was having a conversation with a UCC colleague about something that happened at his church. So, but life is good. Life is good. All right.
Well, let's talk about the CLF. Let's talk about the Church of the Larger Fellowship. Now, Meg is the minister, right? And she has a whole group of people here. Let's start by everyone introducing themselves and saying what role they play in the CLF. So I'll call on you, so you don't have to kind of wait to see if someone else is going to talk before you. So Mandy, we'll start with you. Mandy. Hello, Mandy.
Hello. I'm Mandy Goheen. I live in Montgomery, Alabama, and I am the Prison Ministry Learning Fellow, and I do that. I work with all the prisoners. We have 680 plus prisoner members of the CLF at this point.
Great. And Lynn?
I'm Lynn Ungar, live in California in the east side of the San Francisco Bay, and I'm the Minister for Lifespan Learning and the editor for Quest. And in addition to religious education sort of stuff, I write the Daily Compass Meditations and do various sorts of jobs that I term word girl.
All right. And Jorge?
So I am Jorge Espinel. I am joining you from Cali, Colombia, and I am the director of the Latino Ministry.
Oh, great. Thank you. And Jazmine? You got to unmute, Jazmine. There you are.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jazmine Steele. I am coming to you live from Washington, D.C., Washington, D.C. area, and my role at the CLF is Communications Director.
And of course, our regular from the CLF, Bob, why don't you step out from behind the chalice?
Yeah. You guys see me all the time, so I don't know what the fuss is about, but I primarily focus on supporting worship and planning and executing our worship. We also have a White Allies Covenant group that I convene, and I teach a class on white privilege. What the heck is white privilege? That's coming up in December. And I also do some work with our military ministries.
All right. So, Meg, how big is the CLF?
We have about 3,500 members.
Okay.
And then we have a whole lot of people who are engaged via social media who aren't members. So, like every congregation now, membership is a more elusive term, but we reach, hundreds of thousands of people, but there's a much smaller core who are really actively engaged in various ways.
And how long has it been around?
Started
this is some new thing, right?
Started as an outreach to soldiers in World War II.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah.
Isn't that cool? And so then in 1970, the UUA had a budget crisis and said, you're no longer, it used to be a department of the UUA, part of the extension department. And in fact, the fellowships, Monroe Husbands, who started about 400 fellowships, that was through the CLF back in the 40s and 50s and early 60s. Then in 1970, the UUA just said, it was that budget crisis, and they kicked us out. We became an independent congregation at that point. So since then, we've been something of a hybrid organization where we are, as Stephen Jonas and our former board chair said, we're the Billy Graham Evangelical Outreach for Unitarian Universalism, and we're also a congregation.
So what's your programmatic bandwidth? What is it that you guys do?
Well, I think you're seeing a lot of it.
I know.
You could come in, and I seem to be better at the minute, but I'm not trusting my technology today, which of course is where it all breaks down, everything that we do. But we do online work. We also do really Paper Quest, which goes out every month, is probably the product that comes out the most. But Jazmine, why don't you kind of do an overview of that'd be great.
The CLF is, you have to excuse me, my voice is a little rough this morning, but the CLF is an online congregation and it's funny how it spans both outreach as well as worship for people. So the CLF has over 50 different ways in which it communicates with people, providing spiritual content between websites, social media, email marketing, all of these different ways that we're connecting with people. On top of spiritual programming, there are also other educational opportunities, so people can take classes through the CLF. And I've been blessed to know that the CLF also has been a place for spiritual formation for ministers. A lot of people in Unitarian Universalism have come through the CLF and been a part in some kind of capacity in their ministry development. So it's formational, and it's great because it's bringing people from all over together in a really unique way.
So so tell me about worship with the CLF. Like, you do online work now. Didn't you used to send out like whole worship services in an envelope or box that people would do as programming for fellowships or something like that? Do you still do that?
We still do that. It was called Church in a Box. And then now it's called Worship Express. But that's mostly not what we're doing. That's kind of the offline part of it. So.
But that's where you started doing worship.
Yes, and Lynn's of Church in a Box to online services, which are very different.
Yeah, that's what's interesting to me, because the online worship experiences is something that I think a lot of local congregations can do or can piggyback with you as they start to reach beyond the people who can actually get to their brick and mortar church. So when did you decide to go online with worship, and what did you learn when you did that?
Am I answering that question?
Anyone.
Because we could, in some ways, have Joanna be the one to answer that question. So yeah, we had Church in Boxes. Here, we'll send you worship to do in your congregation for small congregations that didn't have ministers or didn't have resources to have ministry for worship every week. And we had a lot of years where we sort of went, wouldn't it be nice if we could worship together, but how would that happen? Because for most of the duration of the CLF, this notion of having live-streamed video did not exist. And it seemed weird, like, well, we could videotape a homily, but you'd be by yourself, and what would you do with it? So finally the technology caught up with the need, and it became possible to stream worship. And so Joanna was our intern. It was before we started calling them Learning Fellows, at the point where we were like, okay, there's this thing called live stream, and it seems to be designed for people to, like, do stuff in public, and look, there's a chat bar and people can talk. That'll be cool.
And we were supposed to be trained by the live stream company. Meg, do you remember this? And that was when the hurricane hit the East Coast. So it was kind of a matter of, I kind of went in, and all of us were just kind of like, okay, well, we're just going to have to kind of figure this out as we go.
Which hurricane was that?
I don't even remember, but
that was what, 3-4 years ago?
So,
was it Sandy?
No,
really?
I don't think it was Sandy. I think it was the one before Sandy. But Kristen Schmidt also was a Learning Fellow that year. She was halftime at King's Chapel and halftime with us, which I was. And Kristen sings. So we'd meet and we'd say, well, we need this song. Kristen, go sing it. And she would go home and sing into a mic. And, I mean, we really, as Joanna said, we walked both ways uphill in the snow that year.
So I have a question for y'all, since I am no longer with the CLF, other than in my heart and on the VUU. Meg and Lynn, I'm sure that y'all remember I think that one of the most aha moments for us was one of our very first worships, where we because Meg's goal was always that it wasn't about the worship service, it was about connecting people. And so we had a homily, and then we had a question about, you know, what are difficult questions that you struggle with. And we had all anticipated, Lynn and Meg and I had all anticipated it being, you know, big philosophical questions. And instead it was these really emotional questions like, why did my mother never leave me, or never love me? You know, why did my husband leave me? Which completely freaked Meg out, and she made sure that by the next broadcast we had like all of the ministers ready at the phones in case anyone needed pastoral support. My question is, have you continued to see that level of engagement and people willing to be really vulnerable in what y'all have done?
Yeah, Bob, why don't you take that one?
You know, when I started this internship a year ago, one of the I had some honest questions about how can this be a real church, and I'm here to say it's a real church. Part of what's so amazing when you go to Joys and Sorrows, I'm going to make a sweeping generalization here, but when Joys and Sorrows happens in bricks and mortar churches, it's often very general or positive. So it could be my joy is I just had a great vacation. I have a sorrow for Syria. And it's a totally different thing when the Church of the Larger Fellowship does Joys and Sorrows live during worship. It's I finally have an interview for a job because I've been unemployed for 6 months. That's my joy. My sorrow is I'm in a domestic violence situation. It's the level of vulnerability and candor that I've never seen in bricks and mortar churches, or rarely seen in bricks and mortar churches. And it's a weird thing. I think somehow the internet actually creates safety for folks. Having that slight intermediary quality creates safety for folks to be really honest. So I think people are pretty good on that.
Well, people have observed that people are much more uninhibited on the internet. I mean, it comes out sometimes in the way that people can be extraordinarily nasty.
Yeah, not in a good way.
Yeah, you know, on the internet because you're not face to face with people. But I imagine it shows up as a willingness to be intimate, and you know, Post Secret and all those other things are about people sharing, anonymously sharing. You know, really intimate stuff. So I imagine that works. So how many worship services do you do?
We do two a week. Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern and Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern, which works really well for our European members because that's after work on Monday. I want to just tell another quick story about a profoundly intimate moment that happened during a worship service too. That really, to me, speaks to the possibilities of internet worship. A few weeks ago, we spontaneously planned and executed in the space of 4 hours a vigil, a midweek vigil, because it was the same day as the Portland shootings, the latest gun massacre, and also that week a CLF member who was on death row, a member of our prison ministry, had been executed. And a congregant called for it, and we thought it was appropriate. And during the pastoral prayer, so we rolled this thing together in 4 hours. We had 45 people from all over the country on Zoom, which is a different format. Zoom allows each person's face to show up in the screen. Most folks turn off their video. And it'll be like 10% of the folks will have their video on, and everybody else will have their video off out of a sort of shyness or something. During the pastoral prayer in the beginning, Meg asked people to turn on their video, and I'd say 80% of them turned on their video, and so you could look at this sea of faces, which is something you don't get very often. If you're in a bricks and mortar church with the old pew setup where you're all facing forward, you don't see other people's faces so much. We can see everybody's face. We can see the grief. We can see the mourning. We can see the frustration. You can see people crying. You see people praying. It was a profoundly, profoundly spiritual, religious, connective moment. So it can happen.
So let's talk about the prison ministry a little bit. Mandy, tell us about the prison ministry, because this is not online stuff. This is still paper, right?
Yeah, it's we have, like I said, about 600 80+ prisoner members, and they get pay-per-quest, and they also have access to become a pen pal with another Unitarian Universalist. So we have about almost 200 pen pal matches right now, and we're building up a larger group of them. They also have access to religious education classes through correspondence courses, and we have a book project where we send in chapters of books. We have an agreement with Skinner and Beacon House to like get the books in text form, so it's hard to send books to prisons. So we send them a chapter at a time, and it comes like a letter. Let's see what else. Oh, and then pastoral care. I answer a lot of letters, just probably about 15 a week, sending people a little note. And it's the beauty of it is it's very much like pastoral care, where we would say, oh, that sounds really tough, tell me more about how you feel, and then you wait weeks and you get the next letter and you respond to that, and it's sort of sweet and slow motion. And our prisoner members is, oh my gosh, you called me by my first name.
Oh my goodness.
It's just, you called me by my first name, this place is so terrible, and you made my week by sending me a letter that had my first name in it. Especially, we have some folks who are trans, and to call them by the name that they've chosen for themselves, to be called by that name, not to be called by a number or their last name, is just a huge deal. One of the most intricate and important parts of our ministry, though, is keeping track of these folks, because they are transferred and they move so much. And I have to lift up Beth Murray in our office, because she keeps track of people, and if we don't know where they are, they can't get access to our literature. And my other huge goal with the Prison Ministry Expansion Project is we're engaging churches on the outside to do some of the religious education with us and some of the project work with us, which will be really fun.
Joanna, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm curious what I don't personally know you, so I don't know what your views were before you began this, but have your personal views changed since doing this ministry?
Well, tiny backstory is I was a foster parent for years, and I have 6 children. My husband helps. We have 6 adopted children, and all of their biological parents were incarcerated at some point, every single one of them. And so this journey really started with me wanting to do a project with a group called Aid to Inmate Mothers. And I asked them if I could go and do a meditation group in the women's prison here in Alabama, and they said yes. And it took a while, and I had interviewed at the CLF, and things evolved where I got the position as the Prison Ministry Learning Fellow. But the thing that really changed me was about the 3rd time I'd gone into the prison, and I walked out, and it was this beautiful sunny day, and I was like, oh my gosh, this was the best day of my life. And I just walked out of prison, and just the deep connection with them, and the vulnerability and the realness of the folks that we are helping. I mean, can you imagine what a great day is that all you have to do for ministry is call someone by their first name, and you make their week. So it's really cool, and I love it, and I eventually want to go into parish ministry, but I know that I will always need a connection with people who are incarcerated.
I just wanted to add that the prisons are really full of fundamentalism. And for people to find a religion that accepts them, many of them, including Kelly Gissendaner, the woman who was executed, are part of a number of spiritual communities. They want to get every bit of support that they can while they're in prison. So they might be part of a Muslim group, a Christian group, CLF. I mean, they're just looking for support. But they are really, in my opinion, they're our model parishioners, because they engage in spiritual practice. I mean, they have to. It's not optional for them. If they're not going to be, just giving up on life altogether, they're going to be finding spiritual practice. And so reading their descriptions, for me, whenever anyone says Unitarian Universalism is only for upper class white people, I just say, here's the lie to that. Here's the lie to that. Here are people who tell us every day their lives are being saved.
So who are your pen pal correspondents with prisoners?
If they have to be a member of either the CLF or a bricks and mortar church for at least 6 months, so they have to have some foundation in Unitarian Universalism, and they're really just folks all over the country who like to write letters. That's another sweet part of this, is it's kind of that art of correspondence that folks really enjoy, and it's so different. It's such a different act of the CLF to have those folks, and a lot of them I've talked to. My first project was to reach out and talk to all of them, and it took me about 8 months, and I spoke to about 70% of them, and I was the first person at the CLF they'd ever talk to, because talk about extreme, like older people who don't maybe online ministry as much. I have this kind of big collection of people I'm madly in love with, and a lot of ministers too are in pen pal.
I know in the brick and mortar church that I go to, there's a fair number of people who have been studying about mass incarceration and becoming conscious and aware of prisoners, and I don't know if they know that would be an opportunity for them to make a deeper and more personal commitment around those issues, something that would be of help to someone else and also a learning experience for them as well. So if you're a listener out there or a viewer out there and you wanted to become a pen pal, how would you contact CLF, Mandy?
Yeah, it's on there's a application to become a pen pal on our website under the prison ministry. And the other thing that speaks to what you're discussing is the common read is Just Mercy this year, and there's contact information for us in the curriculum that goes with that, so you can become a pen pal. Another thing that we're working on is starting to step into the role of justice work to end mass incarceration, and I've been developing. The cool thing about being in Montgomery is the equal justice initiatives here, the Southern Poverty Law Centers here. I have some folks that I can be in relationship with to work to end mass incarceration, and we really want to step into as well.
Well, I want to kind of move along here because we got not a whole lot of time left, and we have so much more to talk about. I wanted to talk to Jorge a little bit about the Latino. He's down in Colombia, and about the CLF in Latin America. So tell us about that, Jorge. We can't hear you. Are you talking yet?
Yes, I am.
Okay, there you are.
Can you? Okay, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, well, it's always,
It is. So it is not only Latin America; it's also in the United States. So part of the idea of the Latino Ministry came from a need, which is when you are a Unitarian Universalist in English and you want to find something, you go to the CLF website, Quest for Meaning. You go to this UUA.org website and you find all kind of amazing things. So you can really go to those websites and understand and get a deep view of what Unitarian Universalism is. And at some point we realized that there is nothing like that in Spanish. There was nothing like that in Spanish. So we said, okay, so we need this. We need this because not only the Latino Hispanic population is growing in the United States, but also because people is looking for us in other places, in Colombia, in South America. So that's the beginning of the Latino Ministry. So the first goal is and has been to create a Unitarian Universalist identity in Spanish. And that has been also my journey in the sense that I went to seminary and I studied everything in English. And then I came to Colombia and it was like, okay, so how do I speak about this in Spanish? And I had to learn the language and I had to adjust it and I had to see what works, what doesn't, and just make a whole translation. So the way we're doing it now is we are involving different people in the conversation. You know, how just a very basic thing. For example, how did you say Unitarian Universalism in Spanish? And there were at least 3 different groups of people that translated in different ways. And it's like, okay, this is it. Very smart people. They can tell you why. So that's we are a baby, very little baby.
So how long has this project been going?
About 1 year. Around 1 year, yeah.
All right. So you're the first minister of this project.
Yes.
Yes.
And will not be the last one. I hope.
Okay. Well, that's...
I'll just say that we do this in partnership with the UUA's International Office and also with the International Council of Unitarian Universalists. So CLF's piece of it is this translation that Jorge is talking about, which is so important to reach out to people, which is our mission, but also through those other auspices, he's doing other really interesting work. Like he just went to Cuba, for instance, and met with the Universalists there, which was part of the ICUU piece of this. So we're always collaborative every time we can be.
All right. Okay. So how many Unitarian Universalists are there?
That's a difficult question. So what we have seen now is that we have people that is interested. If I have to say a number, I will say, 200, but it's really a guess.
Okay, that's individuals.
Yeah, there are some groups. So part of what Meg was talking about is that then people find that and it's like, oh wow, this is great, you exist. I didn't know something like that exists. And the next question is, so now what? Like, okay, so let's get together. Okay, so we are trying to find ways to get together online, CLF style. And then the next thing is people start saying, okay, but I want to do something locally. What can I do? So we are creating the structures and the ways of doing that. So yes, we have individuals, but what we have seen is that the natural way of things happening is that once they understand that, they want to get together with other people. So it's starting to change.
So that's basically fellowships, house churches, etc. Kind of formations. Okay, right, and lay led. You know.
Yeah, that's part of the question that we're having with the international specifically at the international level. Who is okay? So who is who here? So who? I mean, we need some kind of leadership. So who are going to be our leaders? How do we train our leaders? How do we name them? How do we do? And the thing is that the ICUU has a lot of experience on that, so we are drawing into the experience of the ICUU and the UUA International Office and try to answer those questions. So yeah, lay-led, but there is some need for the ministerial relationship there, and we still don't know how to navigate those needs.
Do you do anything online in Spanish?
Yes, we do. Actually, we are changing right now. We were having bi-weekly services, and now we are starting a new project. It's a different one. We are changing it a little bit, which is a friendship circle. So the idea is to allow these people that said, okay, now what? To say, now what? Get together. Let's meet each other. Let's talk. Let's see our faces.
And that'll be both people in the U.S. and people in Latin America, because it's online.
Yes, anyone that has a computer. So we have people in Latin America, we have people from the Caribbean, we have people from Spain. So yeah, it's a very wide range of geographical places. Yeah.
Do you mind? I guess I can't help but go to the tech question because of just being in the CLF thing. But do you find there are different kinds of tech challenges around doing an international ministry like you are? And how does that work? And what are you learning that's making it work better?
Well, first of all, it's education. So the first thing is we are realizing people, including myself, we haven't realized the power of just a Skype conversation, and then realizing that Skype may not be the best way of having a nice conversation. So just creating the need. We're creating the need. So for example, I talked to a person in Brazil, and they say, well, I know that this group has existed for 10 years, but I never talked to them. And I say, why? And then he thinks for a moment, and he says, because I didn't know this kind of communication existed. So he's like, okay, so now how do we create that conversation? and then realizing that Skype is not the best, and then like the conversation starts. Do you have a Zoom? Can we use those? Can we use the resources of the CLF? Of course. How are we going to do that? So it is an ongoing relationship, and the questions and the needs are just showing up.
Mm-hmm. Great, great. Jazmine, on communication, why don't you explain to me what you do? Is this the content of communication, or the technology, or the breadth of communication, or it's a big word, and then it covers a lot of things.
It does. I think originally when I came on board, one of my specialties and what I'm passionate about is creating and thinking about the new ways that we can engage millennials with spirituality. And so I'm very interested in doing that type of work and working with artists and thinking of new ways to engage people. So I was brought on with that perspective. I believe that the position called for me to take on a more breadth of communications role. So right now, a lot of the work that I've been doing is organizational and processes and figuring out, basically that we have 50 channels, and how do all of those channels talk to one another, and how can the CLF be strategic in the way in which that we use all of these different vehicles, and so that when we set goals, we're able to know exactly how to navigate the thing, because it is a huge web of, it's a lot going on at the CLF, with it being something that is online and can touch so many people. That's the beauty of it, but it also can be a challenge, just in terms of management. So.
Well, you're running a big communications company, basically. And so Hank, you look like you're going to say something.
I mean, one of the things that's interesting, hearing all this too, is that for me, as I hear this stuff, I sort of think, oh, this is sort of like the direction that, in many ways, the church, quote unquote, church is moving into, sort of away from brick and mortar churches, really into being places where people can gather online, get resources, and whether they're going to get a bunch of people together down at the local coffee shop or at a park or at the food pantry, or they're meeting online from all across, vast, distances. That so much of the of like sort of the new and exciting thinking that's going on in our in church. Not just Unitarian Universalist Church, but in religion. I mean, I should say, in North America or globally is sort of happening at the CLF, and I don't know how much of that was sort of planned, or if you guys have just sort of here's a need, here's a way for us to try to solve it, and have moved in that direction. But there's so many things I kind of go, oh, well, if somebody wants to start like a new church, a new Unitarian Universalist church, they should probably be looking more at the ways that that the CLF works, rather than how some church that was founded in the 1600s in New England works.
Hey, it's been working for 500 years. Why should
right. I mean, does that make sense? Does that sound right to people? Am I crazy? I mean, did I not?
No, you're
not at all. Well, about this, you're not. I mean, I think what's important is the reason that we have the learning fellows that we have is because so many seminarians say this is the kind of ministry I envision doing. It's much more like this than like a traditional bricks and mortar church, and including seminarians who don't come to the CLF to intern but are trying to do this more creative work in other settings, because the work that we're doing, really some version of it, every congregation should be doing. I mean, every congregation who's meeting in bricks and mortar hopefully has an extension that's not. And we've taught other churches classes about some of what we're doing, and would love to share more.
Well, that's when I had when we had our 150th anniversary in Ann Arbor, and we wanted to get together what was innovative in churches around the country, I invited Meg to come and talk about online ministry, because that's the CLF is leading on that, and you know, I wish I had a communications director when I was minister of a church. I mean, I was the communications director, but I didn't have it. You know, for most brick and mortar churches or parish ministries right now, there's this sense that we need to be going online. We need to be offering worship and fellowship opportunities and organizational opportunities and communicating online, but they do not have the processes and structures anywhere in place to do it. Go ahead, Jazmine.
I didn't mean to step on your toes.
That's all right.
But this is an area of passion for me because I really saw a unique niche with the Unitarian Universalist denomination in that a lot of, you know, all denominations and churches, as you expressed, are in the midst of trying to figure out how are they going to continue to pass down the legacy of religion and spirituality, their churches. People are concerned about the dying churches. And, that's just a problem within religion and spirituality. But what I saw as a huge opportunity for Unitarian Universalism is the fact that millennials tend to sway and identify as unaffiliated, religiously unaffiliated people. So therefore, there's a huge opportunity for them to connect with a religion or a place. They're looking for a place where they can be in community and they can be on a spiritual journey and path that's not judgmental with other people. And Unitarian Universalism is one of those places. It's just unfortunate that it hasn't really been the nature of Unitarian Universalism to be evangelical in that way. So there's a lot of ignorance, a lot of opportunity for outreach. And, you know, it's a message that I think I'm passionate about kind of getting out there and telling people and saying, hey, there is a place, there's a denomination, there's this thing. And we also know that technology has taken over. We live in a postmodern society where everything is about tailoring it to your individual experience. That's kind of how we're evolving as people. And so religion, we see that also in religion and spirituality, where people are feeling like they can be a little bit more empowered to take on their religion and spirituality. Because in the past, the Christian rhetoric, at least, was that you don't question, you know, it's a tradition that's handed down, and it's that wasn't really welcome. And so the younger people really taking that, like kind of challenging that and feeling empowered to do something different. And so I think there's a huge opportunity for Unitarian Universalist churches in general, and especially one that's online, where you don't even have to worry about them physically driving to you. They can log on. And so, you know, when I approached the organization CLF, that was one of my main reasons for wanting to
talking about, like, speaks to the need for an intentional communication process, like, you know, which Jazmine is finally bringing to us. You know, and the perfect example is the person who came before, like Jorge. What he's doing is unbelievable. It's totally crazy, and I mean, crazy in a great way. Like,
just to be clear.
You know, and so, and like, VUUs are always like going blah 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 about multiculturalism, and the story sort of ends at like, well, there are, you know, like Tulsa and DC, you know, and no one knows what Jorge's up to, and it's, I mean, not nearly enough people know what Jorge's up to, and we should be yelling it from the rooftops. I'll stop my rant now.
Joanna, you had something to say.
Yeah, so whenever I meet with someone who is about to start at the CLF, because people will come to me and ask for advice or want to know about my experience, and what I tell them is, look, if you see a burning bush, Meg Riley is going to try and throw gasoline on it. And so you have to realize that any idea that you have, you can't just casually mention an idea. You know, she loves out-of-the-box thinking. So I'm curious, what's on the horizon? What are the new, you know, ideas that are bubbling around the CLF?
Oh, it's so exciting. The new idea is sustainability.
Oh, you're in your board meeting.
Well, that's exciting. Yeah, I'm doing the UUMA entrepreneurial class, and really, I mean, the trick with online ministry is that we all think everything online is free.
No.
And that's, you know, we really have not done a good job at creating product. So because we're that hybrid church organization, we never want to put a price tag or exclude anyone. But in point of fact, sustainability really is. We're in that stage of development where, you know, doing business plans for a whole lot of pieces of it is huge. But I'd say besides that, which is probably more interesting to me than to everybody, engagement is the path to sustainability, which is to get more and more people owning this so it's not as staff-driven. So that we now have, in our Facebook groups, we have a cohort of volunteer moderators who work really hard to keep those Facebook groups living by our covenants together. And, you know, we're constantly figuring out how we can engage more people in the ministry, because even though we have a lot of these great learning fellows, we really want to move that leadership out. So as Mandy mentioned, bricks and mortar congregations to partner with us some of that adult education rather than us having one person who needs to do all of that. Our person is supporting those leaders. So really it's building it to be led from in a much more open way that still has enough structure to hold the covenant and the values and everything. So it's really interesting, and we're really working to figure out how to support our small groups in different kinds of ways. You know, now that the UUA Worship Web has such great resources, Church in a Box, you know, the written materials aren't really the center of what we have that's unique. So, you know, how do we draw on our strengths, which is really reaching out to the individuals and really support the small congregations through what we've got. So that's a couple of them.
You know, one of the interesting things about sustainability is the whole shift toward, you know, the app market, which is, you know, very lucrative, but yet depends on millions of people buying something for $2 rather than 1,000 people buying something for $2,000. And in some ways, because you're an individually you target individuals, that kind of like really low cost, high volume product is an interesting thing. Well, anyway, I don't want to get into business plans. Right? Is anybody?
Are welcome. All suggestions are welcome.
Are other denominations doing what you're doing? Do you know who are your rivals out there in the online world?
You know, as Joanna knows, I get this little green tinge when I look at Darkwood Brews material. It comes out of a bricks and mortar church in Omaha, and of which Warren Buffett is a member and helped fund their startup, which calms me down when I get too green. But they do fabulous online worship. But they're linked to a bricks and mortar. Extravagance is a UCC congregation that's only online, and I went to their startup, and I'm watching them evolve. Most of the online ministry does come out of a particular bricks and mortar church, and I guess the other thing on the horizon that I should mention is that we're going to try in January, February, and March, collaborating with First Church in Portland to do our online worship. Our former learning fellow, Terry Bernor, is now the intern in Portland, so I'm actually going to go out to Portland for part of the winter, and we're going to try doing a really hybrid service, because most of the churches that do online worship, you just sit and watch the pulpit and you watch the pews, but you're not really engaged in a personal way if you're not there. So we really want to try to create a model that hybridizes. We had one of our former fellows, Laura Campbell, did her ordination with us, and it was live streamed, and people did the laying on of hands remotely on the screen and were putting their hands up and saying things, and it was this moment where the people in the room were hyper aware that they weren't the only ones in the room, and the people not in the room felt like they were in the room. And so we want to really try figuring out how to use technology to create a sense that the people who aren't in the room are really there. You know, they're trying that at GA with remote delegates, but it's just kind of like, you know, it's this. I mean, it's a step, but it's periodically you just hear this voice through a mic, you know. So if you saw a Twitter feed up on the screen all the time of what people were saying, the in the room and the out of the room people could be in dialogue. So
I don't know, as a person who used to preach, you know, in a brick and mortar church, the idea of knowing what people were thinking out there while I was preaching is a bit daunting, shall we say. We're approaching near the end here, and there's so much more to talk about. I wanted to talk with Lynn about what she saw as the particular needs of spirit, you know, where people are hooking in spiritually. What kind of spiritual development are they looking for when they're not people coming into a church where they expect it, but where they're like out in the online world? What's different about faith formation in the online world than in the brick and mortar church? Yeah, you have 2 minutes to answer that, Lynn. Maybe we have to have you back and do that question too. But everything you're talking about is so applicable to all the other kinds of religious institutions. But go ahead, Lynn.
Well, I think one of the principles of religious education is it's all faith formation. Like everything is religious education, everything is faith formation. That's what churches do. And I think that what Jazmine was talking about the numbers of people who are out there in the world with a sense of wanting something deeper, wanting something more connected, wanting to feel like their lives have meaning, and not quite knowing how it is that that happens. That's a really large number of people. And so to find easy entry ways, here's a reflection that you can do every morning and ask yourself a question. Here's a way that you can come to worship or just see the homilies later. You know, if I only have 10 minutes, I can go and watch a homily and get a reflection question and ask myself, what does this mean for me? And there's a lot to lament about the pace at which our society moves, but it is the pace at which our society moves. And to be able to offer people very bite-sized, available, here's an entry point. It might take you into, I really want to be in a covenant group and I want to be in long-term conversation, or it might just give you something like, I can start my day in this centered kind of place. I need to feel like somebody is talking with a message of caring and connection. I can get that. And so in some ways we don't even know what our offerings mean to people, because there are so many people who just touch in small ways that, I mean, the letters we get from prisoners are amazing because you can like actually see, this is why this made a difference to me. This was life-changing. And people who have this enormous need for connection are like, yeah, this really matters. But the reality is there are a lot of people in the world with an enormous need for connection, and we see them on Facebook and we see them giving little parenthetical hugs around people's names. It's like one of those conventions, you put brackets around somebody's name and that's a hug for you. And those just little pieces are genuine places of connection, and I think that there's an enormous need for ways that people can connect to each other and connect to themselves, and find that depth and intimacy, even if it's only in a couple of minutes at a time.
Well, that's you know, that's the whole way of having to be a religious leader in this kind of very wide open environment of the online world, where you don't have that kind of once you gathered them into a brick and mortar church, it's a different kind of proposition. So it's like, how do you make that initial contact, and what do people really want for it? All of this is very interesting, and we should talk about all of this again sometime.
Well,
not just about the sleep.
Each one of these people, each one of these things could be its own conversation.
Yes,
so much
yes.
great stuff. I just want to hear more from everybody. So.
Yeah. Well, Meg, I'm going to turn this back over to you. What do we have for next week?
Next week we have Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism back with us. They're going to be here monthly, and next week is their week, and so I'm excited to catch up with them about what's been happening in October. And then we're going to have the folks from Lucy Stone, who won $100,000 for their cooperative design for housing, come and talk to us.
We all want to tune in on that, don't we?
An exciting month ahead. So.
All right. Well, I think that's it for us, right?
Yes, indeed. Take care, all. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Well,
bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.